Shirley here with Talis Moon, and this is a moon hour. Yes, so I've been tending to my own moon, so to speak, and there are always these eurekas and epiphanies when we begin to align with our own natal chart in a way that is actually remediating and positive. Um, and the things that came up and coincided with things I see in the world where we still get to hear voices of actual people. Um, a couple of times, and I think the fact that Venus is co present with Uranus in Gemini is giving that as well. With Mercury in Leo, then we are able to see that. I see many videos of women um, from all over the world talking about the fact that to upkeep a man was why they're no longer dating, or women not interested in dating. Women even talking about the male loneliness pandemic as well. In the past, women had to completely give up their own emotional needs and sensual needs, and that was something that while many men perhaps longed to or missed the things that they were receiving, um, which was mainly poisoned food, but they don't know that. There is a lot of social engineering and a lot of social engineering done to deprive people so that they long for something. And the manifestation, especially now with Saturn, Neptune in Aries, the sign of sovereignty, the manifestation of sovereignty might be unusual to all of us of how it is coming about. I mean, for me, working more with my moon, it's a different type of sovereignty, not from the place of burning bras. I actually bought a Jack Cuba. Um, Ladies burning bras, I bought myself a bra to divert the money away from the traffickers. Um, yeah, that is how it came about. I was like, if I can't house myself, let me at least house my boobs. So, there, so that was an unusual thing that perhaps was at the opening of another trajectory, and then the usual frustration of dating culture. Um, People don't feel like they get treated well, but I can't help understanding that while the social engineering and the secret societies try to pull back, it's almost from a Sagittarian point of view. I have Uranus in Sagittarius. It's almost like you stretch the arrow on the feminist revolution and all those tradwife trends and all those brotherhood rituals and all those things that they are exposed from different interests, but the fact that the information is coming out is coinciding with the internal sense of something was missing and we didn't know what it is. And the social engineering tried to put it as if it was the longed for past that was missing. And that's kind of like stretching the arrow back, 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 back. And then eventually you can't stretch it anymore, it releases. And what we're heading to is an even bigger feminist revolution. Now, the spirit of the time tells the story. There were witch hunts, there was attempts to enslave humanity, which ended up with the American Revolution, the Civil War, the suffragist movement, which included all the Black Lives movement, and I don't mean BLM, I don't know what's going on there, but definitely the LGBTQ later movement, okay, in 2000, only in 2015 we had gay marriages when, in fact, in the secret societies, you cannot be real estate owner without being gay. Okay, and I don't mean gay as a sexual preference. I mean gay as a demonstrative behavior during feminization rituals in which men rape men. Some of them perhaps find a way to enjoy sex within that trajectory, but that is not the overall sensation. And yet, to the common people, LGBTQ was presented as a disease, as something that is persecuted, and even life risking to confess, simply because that would mean confessing that you are in the brotherhoods, which is punishable by death. And so, but the brotherhood's overall emphasis on feminization rituals to men, it starts with men, it leads to a society where everybody does their inner work, their inner child, okay, their recovery from trauma, being present in the body, understanding that even what we thought was psychosis is best treated with oops, housing first, and believe the patient independently of ability to work, which has always been the case. Whenever there was too much slavery, there was a Spanish flu, there was a plague, and then the landowners died, and then there were many people that didn't become landowners before that were becoming landowners previously. They were slaves. So the spirit of the times tells a certain trajectory, and there is an emotional tension where all the media is trying to show like that's not where it's going. All the while, the undeniable quest, whether it's by gay men that wonder, how do I have a happy relationship? There is gay marriages, gay rights, gay this, gay that. Everybody moves, even the Palestinians had to have the support of the gay community to get noticed. Of course, because these are the secret societies worldwide, and they're not interested in freedom and sovereignty. But eventually, because they are interested in their own freedom and sovereignty, they are actually going through the process of abolishing slavery, whether they understand that this is what they're doing or not. And whether they're genuinely gay or pan or whatnot, okay? Because the demonstration that people had to make as a straight outside, they had to make as a gay inside. And so they never got to be. If a society were to be is not to be, and if you, God forbid, loved someone, then you would have to betray them in that society. However, that did not necessarily yield sovereignty, because when you try to be yourself, it is also considered treason. And when that comes to megalithic vibes, it crosses the thresholds and begins to dissolve. And so, as people begin to unravel, the trajectory meets them with all types of people that this person did their shadow work, this person did their inner child work, this person did their somatic work of embodiment, this person talked to their penis or their vagina, this person learned to move from misplaced arousal based on trauma that is meant to create the fluids that will relieve and the hormones that would relieve the pain during, usually it was meant for orgasm and labor, but that was unfortunately misplaced because that was used during rape, and they learn to move into relaxed arousal, then express themselves more. Now that creates a crisis in the real estate because people begin to orgasm. When there's a human trafficking hub in the apartment, nobody hears a thing. It's when people actually orgasm that people begin to ponder, and it brings all their inner triggers because either they never had an actual orgasm from relaxed arousal. The birthing is not built at people you are birthing in places that are not compatible with actual birthing, so their voices are not heard. In Soroka Hospital, when Bedouin women come to give birth, you don't hear them. And the way that they would grow their children is not their fault. It's a society that was built on polygamy, and both men, the women, the children, unhappy. Women were forced to be mothers. And I had in my own university, because the university is nearby, studying with the lady. I was teaching her English, and then we have a talk, and she's Bedouin, and she tells me she was forced to be a mother, and then she feels constant guilt that she find it difficult to love her child because she feels she wasn't meant to be mother. Or perhaps in another society she would discover that she wants to be a mom, but the circumstances around that and her trying to be the best mom, even though that she never wanted to do that, or not in those circumstances, are harming naturally, and she understands is harming the child, is harming her, is harming men. And even women in those societies kind of go with the old ways. So sometimes the greatest challenge is the women, the other women. Sometimes the man understands that he was thinking about a housewife or something like that, and he gets a lady that is absolutely unhappy in that role, and he becomes unhappy, even if he would have a fine, whether he has a fine table when he comes home and the children are all taken care of, or he has none of that, he is unhappy because the person that's taking care of the food that he eats is unhappy, and this is energy. And so, while we are at a certain trajectory, it's not that people are going to mold into those pastime timelines, but rather that it's calling for an even bigger feminist revolution, which is also revolution within the brotherhoods, because the treason culture and unfortunately rape culture the brotherhoods are in is the core issue of why they can't have either gay happy relationship or straight relationship that are happy and authentic. If there's some of these people born into the brotherhoods are not at all gay, some of them are, but they don't even have they don't even stand the chance to discover their genuine sexual spark. And for some people, the desire to meet their emotional needs in a way that is not always sensual or sexual is also there. It's a part of, normal upbringing that is never, that it doesn't actually exist. We hear about this as this is normal if we study a little bit psychology, but that normal is never there. And if it is, it's always juxtaposed to some trafficking settings that starts in those brotherhoods and serves for political assassination. And it's very difficult to even deliver the message because people say, what? Marriage is also such a setting. Because they are not even exposed to the results of the feminist revolution, but only in bits and pieces, and that was not anywhere near enough, and we are exactly in those times right now. So if the Uranus was like, hey, what was missing in the feminist revolution? The pill is not a liberation tool. Condoms existed. They were making condoms from, I think, the skin of animals before, okay? The, and the pills are not more efficient. So there began to be pills for men, this is true. But that was not the feminist revolution. It was something that was feminist revolution in the sense that they could, if they managed to take, if they had the housing for which they needed to be trafficked, so they were taken, the entire thing was used to traffic women and rape them, so that during the rape they get less pregnant, so it's less of a trouble to the traffickers. And then women began to ask themselves, well, what about my hormonal cycle? What about my sensual pleasure? What about my orgasm? Gemini is another, it's a sign of children, so it's also a sign of masses of people tend to their inner child, gay, straight, whatever, and they discover also a part that is not sexual, that is not overly sexualized or overly eroticized, because that part is essential to both our sensual self and our inner child. And some of them find out that as they go from the child to the man or the child to the woman, so the woman is a whore and the man is a whore as well in the brotherhoods. And does anybody gets to be? What are these brotherhoods? What do? Oh, they are in charge of the allocation of resources to science, to research, to art, to housing, to medicine, to cosmology, spirituality, the way we see the world. Oh, so that's a pretty big problem. Yes, that very urgently needs to be changed. Absolutely. And so people are left with this ceiling glass that you can tend to your inner child and be safe in your body so much. So you can have a gay marriage, but God forbid you have a gay happy marriage. You can have you can have a relationship, yes, a feminist relationship, but heavens forbid you have a happy feminist relationship. You can be a career woman. Heavens forbid you will be a happy, free, sovereign career woman that doesn't go by to sleep 1.5 minutes a night CEO aspiration thing, okay? And didn't have a heart attack by 21 to be on Forbes list. Um, and so all those things in Gemini are going through a juxtaposition of different compartmentalization things. Because Gemini is about taking something apart and playing with the components. And Uranus is that storm on a mass scale. So people will go to different times and different trajectories. When Uranus ingressed into Gemini, this is my fourth house, and the northern part of my fourth house is closer to the Vikings, okay? Closer to the Viking culture. So the first thing I saw was how the Vikings were killing one another, and they saw it by the skulls. Also, Uranus is technology, and you think about the Pisces ascendants of us. Some of you may have with Uranus, or if you have Uranus in the fourth house natally, then some of your relations with your ancestry is not by immediate bloodline, because there's think about some, for some people is IVF children, but there are also IVF children by sperm donation. There are also and then there is the biological thread, and then there is the actual family, and from my experience both play a role. And and we have the reality checks of like, oh, the Vikings, yes, the Vikings were killing one another like the Bedouins. And that's there was a reason that Hitler was inspired by the Nordic tribes and the Aryan tribes, because they kept on perpetual war, and then he looked back into the past and he said that probably is how we should live today. It is also true that in Aryan tribes a slave woman had more rights than a free man, and this is another trajectory which probably not in all tribes, and probably something that yes we weren't exposed to. And then there is the release of information that already began with the ingress of Uranus into Taurus, about the actual, because Venus is fertility and Uranus is technology. So there was a liberation of the information around cloning technology, which spark up conversations, okay, that are almost ancient, um, about the relation between technology and birth and life and upbringing. Um, so you think about the fact that, think about Urano cancers, um, some people were raised by technology, or their childhood memories have to do with technology. My mother has a Uranus in Cancer in the seventh when she was with her husband in Germany, with her Dutch husband in Germany. She remembered until today the first color TV. That's and think about how that coincided with the relationship, okay, and because that's the seventh house, and then the seventh house rules both the living room and your partners and open enemies. So think about the memory moon of a color TV technology with the partner, okay, and that is how yes, they talk about an unusual couple. Not only did they marry out of the different nationalities, they also divorced. So, and had a baby, okay, but using, yes, but not using, but baby that wanted to be coming with love, and that was necessitating something that satanic ritual abuse lineages cannot provide, which is sperm count. But they usually test the wife first, um, and that is a big exposure. And the way that I'm free to talk about that, because I was escaping a trafficking apartment, and all of my childhood pictures were there. So you see a mother, a child, a dad, and a dad. I was like, who is the father? Both. So and of course that leaked internationally, because that was an organization that was international. So when I say that, it's not something that is an extortion card. It was never a secret in the family. But this is also how Uranus is working on the family unit, or all these pulls to traditional family unit. Basically, it's like pulling the arrow, pulling, and then you cannot pull it anymore, so you'd have to release. And that's creating an entire new wave of revolutions in general, but also a feminist revolution. Think about, if I just think about my own family story, my own upbringing story, it's a multinational story where you can't rely on bloodline, and it stretches the definitions of the natural family. And the reason was because there was not to adopt, because it was insistence that I would be coming to the world with love. And so that was by accident countering every single trajectory of agenda that the Ubermensch project had on a multinational level. Okay. And I guess it got people very interested in quite high ranks, unbeknownst to me, because very naturally just the existence of the component of love completely transformed the entire technological equation. And so when I think about myself, and all the questions around me, okay, when will you settle down? When will you have a partner? At the same time, with attempts to, as usual, present me as a whore, as they always do with not just with women, but with men as well. The very, very funny how I have actually, my teacher, Lada Duncheva, had this years where she was dressing up and she looked very sexy. And so people thought that she was, you know, and she said, I dress like a whore, but my life is like a, what it was, just like a saint, because because it's no, yes, also Sun in the third house, so big feminist business, and her husband, her third husband, was her accountant and began to build her business that is Astrolada now. And so when I think about all these things, about how to meet my own needs, and the fact that I have Uranus in Sag, so that doesn't go with everybody turning themselves Catholic, or it's like giving a praise to Catholic. Like I'll praise Catholicism when I do, and I'll say what I have to say when I have to say it. So finding a partner that fits that, it's quite a challenge. But from the personal to the general, because Uranus is always a societal trajectory, and I do see that in society around me. Absolutely, both by being an astrologer and being called to look at this chart and that chart and that chart, by being a relational astrologer. And so, when you have an expertise, and it's an expert is the person that made a significant amount of mistakes in a particular field, or was exposed to a significant amount of mistakes in a particular field. Okay, it's like a fly in a plane. Okay, you won't live to get to do all that mistakes. So you look at people around you as well. And so when you have a level of refinement in a certain topic, just like when I was teaching English, so I ran into doctors, and I ran into people that run the water industry, and I ran into engineers, and I ran into people that had other type of expertise. So an astrologer runs into people, okay? It doesn't mean that you meet them in person, or even talk to them in person, or okay, because there are always the wing people that want to create certain scenarios, and there's the reality check that an astrologer provides, that it doesn't matter who is the person standing in front of you, when you have that level of refinement and your own unique perspective, it is unique and it is your, I cannot say expertise, because every single day I learn something new. Okay, I woke up today and I learned something new. Every single day I learned something new. So it's not like it's expertise from that trajectory, but it's definitely juxtaposing me with people that part or that sort of expertise in their life is in a trajectory where I would be the complementary person for the spirit of the time. And so from that vantage point, I can obviously see, not only is it not going to the brotherhoods, and yes, revolutions, there are wars and there are all these things, but we are at the gate of another feminist revolution, where both gay and straight people are going to want even more than what they had previously, because they saw that all the supposed freedoms that they thought that they had, a lot of women, if you're a woman that travels the world, okay, then you run into the real trajectory. I had the privilege to rub energy shoulders with people that are beyond what I could expect to encounter in this life. Very simply put. And I'm a common person, okay? I come from a family of working class, and well, the father's family may be involved with the church, but to what degree I don't know. Yes, the family name is vast, and perhaps because of those ancestors that are mixing the common thread and perhaps higher ranks that I'm not necessarily personally in contact with, perhaps that created those juxtapositions. And even in those echelons, I had a very good friend in university. That was old money, and I learned a lot of things from her. She never said the term old money, but when I couldn't find people to befriend because I couldn't afford, let's say, having a dinner or having going to a cafe, then that was the person I could have home cooked meals with. So for me, that was just something I deeply appreciate. But when they were in situation of being assaulted, even the top security upper echelons told them to shush about that. So, and that's, yes. So imagine a man in a secret society. And this is where I think that everybody sees that if no matter how much wealth is associated or involved, there is a glass ceiling that everybody wants to break from their own trajectory. And the engineering that we have is not necessarily around that. And yet, it's something that I definitely see coming up. Yeah, because people are going to be giving up on something only for a while. And then usually there's a life situation that you need to face. Why were you giving up that thing? Okay, during COVID, when there was this some sort of chemical component that was harming fertility, at that time I was growing my business, and I asked myself, I was meeting a business coach, and she said to me, a business is like to grow baby. And I said, well, what if I'm child free? And I do want to have, okay, business or career or income that is, okay, that is sovereign, that is respectful of my autonomy, that is, oh, that's actually why I didn't have a baby. Because I haven't found that in society, both in terms of income and in terms of the society itself. Oh, Uranus is now ingressing to Gemini. And by the way, Rahu was in Gemini back then. And so I began to ask myself how much of my choices around having or not having children have to do with my own choice. And what can I do? Amazing. Great. And what can I do to even understand what is my own choice? Because my mind, my scientific mind, always works in a certain way. If there is a company, if there is a C factor, I want to get rid of the C factor, and the C factor is usually corruption. So I'd get rid of the C factor and see what do I actually want here. When it comes to whether it's my sexual identity, whether it's my, how much of my being also a woman and not a woman was a coping mechanism to deal with a very machoistic society in which if I act like a man, talk like a man, and almost have a girlfriend, and women attracted to me, and by the way, women, I have Venus in Taurus, so the ladies were good looking. Although I never dated anyone because I wasn't sure about what I want, and I like men as well. And so if I act like a man, talk like a man, think like a man, I get respected like a man. And so, but what happens when I'm also a woman? And so even the man in me wanted to say, hey, before I can be a woman, I cannot know if I can be a man. So, and how much of that man-like behavior was a coping mechanism to being a single child to a single feminine parent, and having to be the man in the house. Not in terms of controlling the house, but in terms of the provider or the defender or the person that walks outside and feels safe. I had to provide for that in me. If I would go by the advices I was getting to protect myself, I would be Saddam Hussein or Mussolini. I don't know. Um, yes, some men think like that, and they are indeed in positions where they could do those things. um, yes, but and the change in that is that all of us are beginning to ask those questions. So how do I get the corruption factor out of the way? Even if I would grow family, then I would need to do other things outside being only in the house. My children would get bored, and they would need to grow somewhere. So yes, or even if we would travel, then the world would need to be safe for children to travel. By the way, when I was thinking about having kids, I traveled quite some in Europe when I was a teenager, and I was thinking, oh, I would grow children like those traveling couples, so that the children get to see the world and they might not have this stability and so on that of upbringing. Maybe they would long for that when they grow up. I don't know, but I was thinking about the traveling couple, or where the children get to have a childhood, where they get to see the world, where they get to be exposed to different things and live, half Dutch. So it's about being a citizen of the world, and that's what it means. It's important to have a motherland, but it's also important to travel. And also, Israelis have this, um, yes, tendency to travel, and it's expected to travel and very encouraged. Um, yes, and I guess that kept them for a while from being exiled. But now, with all these King David talks, is there is a risk of having a religious revolution in Israel. Um, and so all those trajectories are actually an opening up of even more aspirations. Because I'm in a situation, yesterday I was thinking about it again, and there are men around me, whether it's in the astral or whatnot, and all of them, to whatever level of evolution we are all at, they're all thinking, and these thoughts about, well, if it's going to be like Iran, I'm going to need to escape, and yet I'm very informed about the things that they don't talk about regarding that, and at the same time being it even more strengthening me that I am a sovereign woman. I'm not a housewife. I'm not a maiden. When it comes to my sexuality, sensuality, and willing consent is so important to me that I would go Hitler over that, okay, and finish the job. I don't know if I would finish the job, but people think Hitler, so they think the Jews. No, 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 no. Everybody was a Jew back then. They didn't like. It's like in Soviet Russia. They didn't like this. Your neighbor didn't like you. This is a spy, okay? And in the Nazi Germany, your neighbor didn't like you. This is a Jew. They don't check. You don't get innocent of being a Jew. Okay, you're guilty until proven innocent, but you don't get proven innocent of being a Jew. Somebody said, "Hey, this person is a Jew," then they go into the concentration camp. So they say, but why would you want to be a Hitler about it? I wouldn't want to be a Hitler about it. I would want to have a world where I can be who I am and not have that compromised by each and other, you know, whatever whatever things pops up now that tries to bring things to a point where absolutely nobody was happy, not the men, not the women, not anyone. And you think about those thoughts in these circumstances where there were kidnapping attempts, where the people that were kidnapped were threatened with forced marriage, where there were Israelis that cooperated with that, psychologists and people that yes, that had a thing to benefit from that, from the child trade, from the human trade, to benefit their own assassination. But yes, but this is how irrational people can be, and without judging them, it's the question of understanding that not only do we not aim to go back to those timelines, but we're actually at the brink of an even bigger revolution. That it's that world that is dying. And so a lot of the people that are sad about that are mainly sad about losing their maladaptive coping mechanisms, and what they are actually afraid of is being free and being happy and being, because there is a lot of junk that they need to tend to on the way. And I can say in the past several years, when I was exposed to ritual and satanic abuse while going through the second frontier of that and multiple attempts to, yes, and I still don't know everything. And the way I look at it, I'm looking to live good. I'm not looking to dredge into the past. Those things usually come up when they come up. Um, but the understanding and I remember when I did chart of Mark the True. Yes, my colleague, assassinated astrologer Nicholas Stoyanovich, did chart of Epstein, and he had Lilith on the ascendant. Mark the True had Lilith and Chiron, I think. Yes, Lilith and Chiron, as the same age of Peter, a week before, or a week before Peter, I think he was born. And if you watched each channel and you don't understand what I talked about, then watch my other channels. But the thing is, he had Chiron and Lilith, has Chiron and Lilith in the fourth house, which means he never got to have in his own upbringing sexual sovereignty as a boy, and then he had to be a placeholder. Mark the True was a man who held the estate of a Peter Ring, a big rolodex thingy, and that was what the White March was about in 1996. They found girls there. Those things happen to boys as well, and this is ritualistic abuse, okay, not just trafficking, and it's extortion cult because they film people and then they can extort higher rank people in various positions to do whatever, because and so on. And those people were also raised in such settings, one way or another, okay, whether they came back to families or not. You can also listen to Teal Swan, which had completely double life. She was going to school, she was a model, she had a family, and she did not even remember what was happening inside. I think it was a Mormon cult, I don't know, the satanic abuse. She went to satanic abuse. And again, remember, in the 1990s, people began to talk about that, and the Americans dissolved it as satanic panic. And then we had the mass shootings, and we had the 9/11, and we had the many things that are the result of the fact that hushing that down as satanic panic was working. In 1996, we had, yes, another, which was the White March with the Rolodex. But when I looked into the natal chart of Mark the True, which was kind of like the Dutch Epstein, he had Lilith and Chiron in the fourth house. And this is where not only did he not have sexual sovereignty in his home as an infant, he had to hold an estate that his house would always be associated with those things, and his ability to talk about that while he was the one who got caught being in that property, and of course he was also raping and so on. If I think as an astrologer, what would be the remedy to Lilith Chiron in the fourth house? He's over 50 now. Then that would be activism about sexual sovereignty and real estate. That being said, the path for the true to do that is kind of realistically not so feasible. Okay, he was the one that caught all the fire for what everybody did, and he was born into such a household and then had to run such an estate. Jeffrey Epstein had Lilith on the ascendant, which means that he was those children. And then, because he didn't have sexual sovereignty, there was nothing that was bringing him out of the death camp. So we know him as the Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, Epstein, Peter Ring Epstein, Epstein Island Epstein. And that is basically the trajectory for all the people that were involved in that as children and adults. They never had the door out of the death camp. Why? Because to keep people mind controlled and extorted makes people do whatever, and the children are used to appease between wealth family to appease one another. So they trade the child, and they even send this espionage child to see what the sexual fantasy of for that person. Because if that person, this is I learned from Survivor. Because if that person is needing for the child to be dead, then they would send a specific child, and if they wanted the child to be alive to do more things. And yes, if I go to Annika Luka's story, she was considered an expandable child, and then when they thought that she has the bloodline signature, then because she had the bloodline signature, so they thought she's like them, she began to be a trafficking child, but only a trafficking child that is like a gift to someone. And then basically her handler smuggled her, he raped her and he smuggled her out of that trajectory. And years later, she was doing in the beginning prostitution, and years later she began to speak as a survivor. So those trajectories that are intending to keep people with the glass ceiling of sovereignty happen to actually cause themselves their own demise. Because if you think about medical warfare, then think about the Spanish flu, okay, the Spanish plague. It was the people in the aristocracy that were losing their estates. There's also the realistic, okay, that you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. When I kept saying that, I received another things like, yeah, Lincoln, he was terrible, he had slaves, he had this, he was a clone. It was like, yes, Lincoln had also a slave that was his lover, and eventually he won the Civil War by abolishing slavery. Of course, he was also all these terrible things because he was together with his slave that most of us didn't hear about. They were opening the door to escape and abolish slavery altogether. And yet the glass ceiling is still something that needs another level and another level of breaking through the glass ceiling. We have, I don't know when the elections are in Netherlands, a candidate that is quite reminding of Pim Fortuyn in their own, in what they say. And when they talked about deporting, basically deporting the Islamic people that wouldn't set with the values of Netherlands. So it was not like, taking the, okay, whatever people make of it, the point was that if people don't live in a certain country and they don't have these values of to be who you are and so on and so forth, and I am the one who responded with, hey, what about our cultures, what about our lineage, we need to change that as well, or we're going to have a code orange. And I don't mean the weather. Code orange is a code for invasion. So even in that, so one of the things I was questioning about was ideological immigration. And so the question of ideological immigration is something that I believe will keep coming up as we have more and more sovereign countries. For example, before a couple of, how should I say it, a couple of decades ago, if somebody would want to immigrate to Israel, I would suggest them to do ideological immigration, but because of the clauses of the Declaration of Independence. Okay, this is why it's so important to look at declarations of independence. I'm not saying that that would be plea would be necessarily accepted, but definitely applying to countries whose declarations of independence is ideologically compatible with the immigrant can be a certain trajectory. But for that to be, we need our governing forces to be free from the many corruptions. And to be very honest, as a person who's been tending to this topic for 2-3 years, if we play by give us the names and off with their heads is a part of Alice in Wonderland programming that is a part of the programming of political assassination. Okay, and that programming includes torture of the people who would do that. It's not because before they do the assassination, okay? So and that is why, because as far as the extortion codes go, to get rid of the upper echelons that begin to leak that information, whether they like it or not, then that would be playing to the hands of the extortion cults. And so in that regard, we are required to treat that as a cultural practice to dissolve, and that cultural practice is also prevalent amongst indigenous tribes, particularly with the training of the shamans and the two spirits, because the two, you have what you see, the sign of the two, what looks like a peace sign, is also insinuating of two genders. Some people in the cloning project say there's an extra chromosome. I don't know. I don't know the genetic engineering around that. I do know that biodiversity is very important for immune system, and so is sexual sovereignty and letting people to have childhood. So essentially, when it comes to using feminization rituals as humiliation rituals, the feminist revolution has a very important trajectory that kind of enables, it kind of nullifies all the mind control stuff that are going within the secret societies, and this is how women got their rights to begin with. Because the free people want to be free. The free builders want to actually be free. The free masons, masonry, architecture, building what is set in stone, and Pluto in Aquarius, sign of architecture, we are transforming what is set in stone and building new things that are set in stone, Saturn in Aries. And so the people within the society themselves say, hey, I want to have a happy relationship. I don't want to be worried about treason within my community, my family, all the time. There are people that don't create contact with all of their family members because they don't want to be sacrificed. People that are afraid to create contact with people because they don't want to risk them as well. Okay? And this is something that makes people live in a perception that people are no good, which is excellent to those who try to mind control people, rather than understanding what John Locke understood. And John Locke was a civil contract philosopher. It was the foundation of the Declarations of Independence of the United States. And that is that all people are born free, all people are divine, and the nature of humanity is a tabula rasa. And this is beyond powerful. And to the many testimonies that I saw of satanic ritual abuse survivors. Some of them were meant to be Epsteins. And the intense amount of energy one has to invest to subdue the human nature, regardless of gender, origin, or bloodline, is so intense that not only the nature of mankind is tabula rasa, but it actually tends to be way better than we think. And if it takes such tremendous amount of energy to subdue the nature of humanity into mind control, treason, and all the horrid things, actually our nature is way better than we were taught to believe. And thus, there is reasons to sustain that a benefic God or benefic divinity, or even without the God, all of those possibilities can allow for, where if it is a divine, then a divine that is kind and benefic, and it is only the action of oppression of the divine within us and the connection with divine. And by the way, those are rituals. The rituals done, torturing children and saying to the other groups of children, pray for this child, pray for this child. And then they see the prayers don't help. And so now the child mind thinks, okay, where is God then? And then they say, oh, pray to Baphomet, he will save you. Or pray to Satan, he will save you. And then they have to betray everyone. Okay? So you see that creation is man-made. And not only that, you see that the nature of all living children, actually, without abuse, tends to be way better than we thought. So not only is mankind a tabula rasa, it's actually way better. And the question of evil in that sense is a question of deprivation of that connection. And this is the Neptunian duality that sees that when we look into the question of evil and we actually see the testimonies, the actual people that dealt with actual evil, we can't help but understand that it took so much to put them through for them to become that evil, that the nature of mankind is way better than we thought. And then, of course, we had to deal with the fact and grapple with the fact that it is mankind that created those situations and those oppressions as well. And so when it comes to the nature of mankind, the more we connect with sovereignty and the more we abolish slavery, we basically have a better nature. So this is the other trajectory that the feminist revolution is just, very simply put, it's about accepting the feminine, not doing humiliation rituals around the feminine, which balances the endocrine system, which balances the ability also to be a man, regardless of straight, gay, and so on, which balances our capacity, Gemini, to hold place for intricacies and for things that don't quite fit in a box. Okay, like gender, like many questions. Okay, we talk about social engineering. When a person says, but I don't fit into none of these boxes. Of course not, because these are boxes and they're also a model that imitates reality that is not truly representative of reality, which is always way more intricate. So but that yin-yang balance and elemental balance, it's dynamic balance, that is essential for our thinking and for our acting, and for our access to choice and for validating ourselves. And yet it is by thinking and acting and choosing when we can and loving ourselves more that we gain that balance. So yes, that is my thoughts for this morning.